And welcome back to our coverage of ONS 2017. We're here with Chris Aniszczyk talking about cloud native computing. And Chris, welcome to the program.
Awesome, glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. I want to talk about a couple things, cloud native computing and also containerizations or containers.
Yep.
I want to start with containers. That's the most confusing to me. I can't speak for the audience, I speak for myself.
Sure.
Give me the really simplistic version of what containers are, and then I'll tell you what my understanding is. If I am a small or medium-sized enterprise, I want certain facets of the network, I want certain functionality, certainly don't want to pay for all the functionality, want to keep it as cost-efficient as possible. Is that where containers plays a role?
Definitely. I mean, containers are definitely a more efficient packaging mechanism for applications, similar to what a virtual machine is, but definitely a lot lighter weight. Like one way to look at it is from a technical point of view, it's kind of like a zip file or a tar file with some fancy metadata associated with it, and essentially that's it. You know, it's really at that level.
I remember we talked recently about again a very simplistic explanation of how containers work and also how orchestration works. Can you elaborate on that for our audience?
Sure. Containers are just one piece of the puzzle, right? So like once you package your application, you need to intelligently lay and distribute those containers around different machines. And kind of the analogy I like to use is if people ever grew up playing Tetris, right? You know, you got all these like crazy pieces coming down, you're trying to like place them as things get faster and faster. You kind of make an analogy where those little Tetris pieces could be containers, and the orchestrator plays the intelligent hand trying to optimize that containerized workload, right? So your goal is to optimally bin pack things so you don't leave any spaces left, right? You don't want to screw yourself down the line in Tetris. So that's essentially what the orchestrator is doing, is taking those different little workloads and optimally placing them across machines in a data center or in the cloud. So essentially how it works.
So within the industry, is there any talk about container wars, and what does that mean?
So, jovially, there are different container runtimes out there, right? Docker is very popular, Rocket, there's some other ones out there. What's happened recently has been interesting so one of the foundations I help run, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, just last week at our main European event, we announced that Containerd and Rocket, two of the most largest widely used container runtimes, Containerd being from Docker and Rocket being from CoreOS, are coming into the CNCF as independently, neutrally run projects, part of the foundation. And as an ancillary effort to that, there's something called the Open Container Initiative, which is standardizing how containers are kind of laid out and run. And so I think in combination with the standardization effort and Containerd and Rocket living in a neutral foundation now is, I don't really think the container wars exist. There's competing like runtimes, but it's more friendly competition. It's just like there's different web browsers. You may be a Safari guy, I'm a Chrome guy, right? We use browsers because one may be faster, one we like the feature of the other. That's what's essentially happening now. But I think it's less of a war, more of a friendly competition and battle, as we see with browsers.
So clearly there's some recognized names in the tech industry that have figured out how to really engineer a cloud native computing architecture. How do you see the rest of the industry sort of following behind?
Yeah, so there's always the fun quote that Google runs 2 billion containers a week, and all this good stuff. So a lot of internet scale companies have figured out, your Facebooks, your Twitters, Netflix, Googles, they're there. They're running in a cloud native way because it's more efficient and cheaper for them to actually do so. Now we're in the situation where other companies are starting to notice within this Cloud Native Computing Foundation, we've started to collect a lot of these technologies that enable you to run your infrastructure like Google. The challenge is educating some of these companies of like how you actually run this way, how you actually have to change your culture to run in a cloud native way. It takes time. So I think part of our problem is like, it's an educational thing. A lot of people still don't know this technology exists. They have to change their culture a little bit to kind of work with this technology. And so I think a combination of education and culture over the next couple of years, we're going to do our best to kind of bring and spread this form of computing out to the rest of the world.
So would you say if there is confusion around containers right now and sort of the theory behind it, are we at the peak of that confusion and it's going to get better, or we have not reached that point yet?
4 out of the 5 largest cloud operators in the world already support Kubernetes as an orchestration platform. So I think we're doing pretty well with the cloud operators, at least trying to offer cloud native style computing to folks. So I think they're a little bit ahead of the curve. It's just more of a matter of companies are still trying to figure out. First, we just need to package our applications in containers, and then we need to figure out how to orchestrate and run them. And so I think we're still in the early days of companies moving and transitioning to containerized workloads.
So I know you had a keynote address at the Open Networking Summit. You just came off of that. I always like to ask this type of question. What would you think we would be talking about as far as containers go this time next year?
From the networking point of view, and since we're kind of at a networking focused event, I think you'll see a lot of larger telcos next year heavily invest in running containerized workloads. I think we'll have great use cases and studies. Different companies will out there hey, by transitioning, the same way Netflix transitioned its video encoding from VM-based to container-based and saved a bunch of, money and efficiency, and in doing so, we'll hear similar stories from, I think, the networking telco-related companies next year as they start to transition to the cloud-native and container way.
Before we go, I just want to mention this, and it's a bit of an interesting background that you have. You really led the open source initiative at Twitter not long ago, and now you're in sort of a bit of a non-profit space. What was that transition like? Yeah,
it's been interesting, right? So I spent most of my career in the private sector. Twitter was great. We were one of the first companies that really helped push an open source version of cloud native. Google was running it internally for a long time, and they weren't so sharing about some of the technology. Things are a little bit different these days, so we developed a lot of cool techniques, shared them with the world, and so coming off that experience and getting a company to run from what was traditionally a monolithic virtual machine-based infrastructure and having them transition to a more cloud-native, container-focused infrastructure was an awesome experience. And now, the fact that I'm working at an open source foundation that is essentially trying to bring that same transition and model computing to the rest of the industry is awesome. It's definitely different since we're a nonprofit and we're more neutral when it comes to things, but it's been great. It's a fun journey, basically spreading the technology that you helped build out at Twitter to the rest of the world.
It was Chris. It was good to talk to you.
Sure, awesome. Thank you again.
Thanks for your time. And for all of our coverage here at ONS 2017, you can go to tinow.org. So long.